everyone, and welcome to episode 7 of the Pod Place. A very, very exciting turn of events over the last couple of weeks with the wonderful Expression Australia partnering up with us to provide Auslan interpretations for each of these episodes. All the past ones will be interpreted over time. We're just getting that work done. It does take some time, as you can imagine. But then with every future episode, we will have that Auslan interpretation. This has been such a dream of mine to get this off the ground and to know that it's now happening. When this was literally just like a little seed, I just sort of started to think about it and how we could really make something rich and accessible for the entire community. And just the fact that we're now doing it is really cool. And I'm here for it. Love it, love it, love it. Thank you for all your wonderful feedback and comments and messages about the podcast so far. They mean so much. And I'm just so grateful to have this space to do this and to have so many people coming forward wanting to share their story. Like it's just, there's so much power in these stories, and it's been a real privilege to chat to these parents. So I just can't wait for all the other stories to share in the future. It's going to be epic. Today's episode is just me and little old me, and I'm here to talk about something that I am so passionate about and something that I used to advocate really hard for when I worked in schools with deaf kids, because I found um, there was such a presence of this idea of visitorship for our kids versus membership for our kids in the classroom. And I'm going to talk all about the difference in these two and why it's so critical that we as parents, educators, anyone working in the deaf and hard of hearing space, while we really, really strive and should be striving to achieve a membership model when it comes to our deaf and hard of hearing kids, because it's what they deserve. And it just has such a beautiful ripple effect on the way that they see themselves, but also the way that they approach their learning and approach their environment and social relationships and all of that. It's just such a big ripple effect. And so I think it's really important for us to highlight the differences between these two models and why the visitorship model is just not appropriate, suitable, acceptable, whatever word you want to use. And unfortunately, we're still seeing it so commonly happening in our early years programs all the way through to our high school programs. And I've seen it in action throughout that, 0 to 18, I've seen it. And so I think sometimes we're not aware that might be the model that we're sort of putting forward for these kids. And when we start to understand a little bit more around the differences between these two and why a membership model is so critical, hopefully we can start to shift our practice ourselves, but also with parents knowing to advocate for that membership model, because that really is the, basis of inclusion, is this membership model, and really ensuring that our deaf children feel that sense of belonging and that they are an equal member within the classroom and within their learning environment. So I'm going to unpack that a little bit with you guys, and hopefully this gives you a few little nuggets of wisdom, some little bits and pieces that you can start to really take with you as you work through your journey moving forward. So I'm excited. Okay, let's kick it off. I'm going to start with the visitorship model, because this is the one that we're seeing still really commonly in educational programs and contexts. And it's a lot of the time unintentional, it's accidental, it's just there's a lack of awareness, a lack of knowledge, a lack of understanding. And so a lot of the time people actually see this visitorship model as a membership model. They think they're achieving it until we start to really dive deeper into what's actually happening for that child. And then we realize, well, actually, this isn't the same thing. They're very, very different. Okay, so with the visitorship model, it's basically that the child, the deaf or hard of hearing child in their learning environment, is treated like a visitor, treated like they are in the room, but they're not there as a permanent member of the class. They're not there as an active or equal member of the class. They are a body in the room. They're present, they're there, but generally the teacher and the peers around them have very little interaction with them. There's not those deeper relationships. Um, there seems to be this presence for them, but they're not attached to the bigger group, the bigger class. I've had situations where I have asked the deaf child after I've come in and they've been with that class for 6 months, and I've asked them what the names are of their peers, and most of the time they have no idea. That's what I'm talking about. They don't know the names of their peers. A lot of the time, they don't even know the name of their teacher. That happens a little bit too. And it's quite harrowing to sit there and have that happen and realize that this child has been sitting in a room for 6 months, but is not an active member of that classroom or that learning experience. And it's pretty bloody heartbreaking. So we want to fix this. We don't want this to be happening anymore. Um, Sometimes the children just aren't expected to perform at the same level as their hearing peers. They're not set the same expectations. A lot of the time they're omitted from activities. Now this happens a lot in the early years where a lot of, for example, all the kids are lining up to wash their hands after a play activity, and the deaf child might not be walking over there. They might want to go do something else. And oh, yes, they can go do that. Don't worry about it. They don't need to be involved in this group activity. They don't need to be involved in this ritual, this routine, this part of our classroom. And those little things, they all contribute to visitorship because you're giving them a different expectation. You're not expecting the same of them. Therefore, they won't meet you with that expectation. They're not going to meet you there. They're going to assume they can do what they want. And that's actually not a healthy way for us to be supporting these deaf kids because they are so capable, so brilliant. But if we keep lowering that bar and not expecting anything of them, then they will meet us there. So that happens a lot. A lot of the time, they're considered one person's responsibility. So generally, a deaf child, deaf or hard of hearing child will come with an interpreter, deaf role model, deaf educator, or a teacher aide, or some sort of assistant within the room. And a lot of the time, that person is seen as that's your responsibility. You just need to deal with the child, and we'll do what we're doing over here. I know that sounds horrible, but it happens so much more than you think. And I try to think and reflect on why that's so prominent, particularly when some of these teachers are brilliant and they are passionate, but it's almost that there's a fear there, or because I don't know what to do here, I'm just going to avoid it. And that is one of the worst things we can do for these kids. The only way we're going to learn how to support and educate these children is to actually do that and make those mistakes and ask those questions that we think are silly. But then we're learning as we go, and we start to actually grow this really beautiful relationship with these children. Um, so that happens a lot. We find a lot of our kids attach like so strongly to their interpreter or their teacher aide or whoever's in the room who's with them regularly because they don't have a relationship with anyone else in the room. So that is their person. And when we see that really strong connection to that one person, that gives us an indication that there's a lot of work to be done in that classroom. There's a lot of building the relationships and bridging those gaps and bridging those barriers with their peers and their teacher that needs to be done. And that brings me to this idea of these social relationships. There's just not this expectation that the hearing peers interact with the deaf child and that the deaf child interacts with the hearing peers. A lot of the time we see this with our signing deaf kids because obviously the hearing kids speak a spoken language and the deaf child is signing. They go, well, they don't have the same language, therefore we can't bring them together. And that's just sort of a concluded decision that happens so often. And so we're starting to see that this child is just in the room, they're present, but they are not an active member of that group, of that cohort. The child is also rarely called upon to contribute to class discussions. There's this assumption that because they have devices that they can hear all the responses in the room, that they understand what's happening around them, that every child that's responding, whether they're at the back of the room, the front of the room, if the deaf child can't see them, but that's okay, they've got devices, so they don't want to contribute, they don't want to contribute. But a lot of the time, the deaf child probably does want to contribute. They just are missing all that multi-dialogue that's happening. They actually can't grasp it. So therefore, they just sit there, they isolate themselves because it's a safer spot for them to be. And so then people read that as the deaf child has nothing to contribute. And they're never called upon to contribute. There is just this different expectation for the deaf or hard of hearing child versus the rest of the kids in the room. And I think that that's a huge part of this visitorship model where we have them in the room, they're there with their support person and they're looked after and great, they're here. I'll give them a worksheet now and again, but there's not that deeper relationship being built. It's a very superficial context, it's a very superficial experience for them. And so, obviously, without, unsurprisingly, the visitorship approach can lead to some really, you know, difficult scenarios for these deaf and hard of hearing kids. It can lead to isolation. It can actually hinder their academic, social, and emotional development. Deaf and hard of hearing kids, as I said, are so switched on. They bring in that visual environment in such a way. There's such a powerful asset to them. They know pretty quickly when they're being excluded. They're not silly. They know it. And so a lot of the time our deaf children will either their behaviors will be like outward, right? They'll be aggressive, they'll want to engage, they'll disengage from learning, they'll make a big show and dance about the fact that they don't want to do something. And that's generally because they've read the room and they've worked it out pretty quickly that their expectations are different. They're not being asked to do the things the other kids are doing. They feel very separated from their class, and that should never happen. That should never happen. And then you also get the kids who just withdraw and don't say or sign a thing, do not try to engage in relationships with anyone in that room because they know that no one wants to. And that's how they feel, whether that's true or not. That is how they feel. Not having that sense of belonging and connection and knowing your peers' names, knowing your teacher's name as like a basic thing is just not good enough. And unfortunately, it is just still happening so prominently through our learning environments because there is this lack of awareness, lack of education, and there's not that natural initiative for many people to seek out what they can do to be more inclusive. And that is happening for a lot of reasons. We know that education is a really tricky, complicated space. Teachers are working so hard. They have, they work more hours than they're paid. It's a whole range of things happening. They're exhausted. They've got, class sizes are growing. And so there's a lot of pressure on them to do all the things all the time. But it's always about if we don't know and we don't go to learn, we're never going to change. And that, therefore, this child is going to sit there year after year after year being a visitor in their learning experience and their learning environment when they could be a member and they could be thriving. And so that is the visitorship model, sort of in a nutshell. And I know that so many of you listening or watching this now are going to be able to actually think about whether it's happening to your child at the moment, or if you're an educator, knowing stories straight up where you've seen this happening in the room. And so recognizing that that is not what we want to achieve, recognizing there's a lot of issues with that. And it all comes down as well to this assumption that we don't really understand how much the deaf and hard of hearing child is absorbing and taking in, and they can read that room and they understand when they're not being included. They really do. My son is 3.5 and he is so aware. He is so aware, and he's a withdrawer. When things aren't happening for him, he will just withdraw himself and go play on his own. And that is a really dangerous place to be. And we don't want that for our kids, particularly for my boy who's so social and wants to be friends with everyone. We need to be bridging those gaps. We need to be really putting the effort into making these relationships deeper and more important for our kids, more meaningful, should I say. Okay. All right. So visitorship model done, tick. Let's look at the membership model. Now, this is the model. This is the sort of environment, the context in which we are trying to achieve. This is what we're striving for, the membership model. So this is where the deaf child is an active and visible, meaning you can see it. You walk into that room and boom, you see that that deaf child is very much a part of that classroom, right? They are a visible member in that classroom, equal member to their hearing peers, and you can see that in the way that they are learning and the way that they are engaging in the classroom. They are included in all learning opportunities. They're not omitted from any. They're not excluded because, there might be sound-based or there might be something that they can't do. There is always a way for them to engage and be a part of every learning opportunity in that classroom. They are given the equal access to all the information and instruction, all the class responses, right? Jimmy blogs at the back says something, that deaf child is given that access, whether the teacher repeats the question that's been said, or the child wears a mic, or there's an interpreter present who's able to actually interpret these in an accessible way. Whatever it is, right? That deaf and hard of hearing child has access to everything, all information, all content, all resources, all instruction on the same basis as their hearing peers, and have the opportunity to respond, because this is a big thing. A lot of the time, again, it comes down to awareness. Teachers don't wait. So with interpreting, there's a lag, right? Teachers don't generally wait for the interpreter to finish, so then the deaf child has all the information and then can contribute. So the teacher will ask for responses before the deaf child's even received all the information. And then by the time the child's ready, that question's been answered. And so it's all those little awareness things, right? And it's working together as a cohort, as a community within that classroom that's going to make that difference. Another really important part of this membership model is that the deaf and hard of hearing child is connected to their peers and their teacher. They know their names. They know their personalities. They've had conversations with them. You know, that teacher really understands that deaf and hard of hearing child. You can go into that room and ask them a question about the deaf child and they know, because they've been teaching them all year. They know them. They have a relationship with them. There is that real understanding of that person in the room. They are provided opportunities as well to develop meaningful relationships with their peers, which is facilitated by the teacher and the support staff in the room, building ways in which they can navigate communication together and work together. I've seen this done so beautifully sometimes, and just the expression on a deaf child's face when they feel included, when they actually like, oh wow, I'm involved in this, I'm included. And the hearing kids are so welcoming and involved and understand. It's just honestly beautiful, and it should be happening in every learning environment. The deaf children are set the same expectations. Obviously, there's adjustments that we always need to make for these sort of things, depending on if the child has language deprivation or where they're sitting, at a curriculum level. But it doesn't really, that's what inclusion is. They are all working towards the same task, but how they get there may be different, right? So it's that same expectation, those same responsibilities, that the child feels like they're an active member. They're all working towards the same thing. They're not in the corner doing a different activity that has nothing to do with what the class is doing. That should never happen. They should always feel like they're a part of that class culture. So, so important. They also have this equal opportunity to contribute, to have those key responsibilities in the room, just like their hearing peers. All of that is just so, so, so important. And ensuring that they're never just left to their own devices because, oh, this isn't really going to involve you, and they're given this free pass, because they actually don't want that. They want to be involved. They want you to put that expectation on them, put that trust in them that they can do it, that they have the potential to reach the same bar as all their friends in that room. They just want to be told that you can do it, and they'll do it. They'll meet you where you want them to meet you. If you give them the tools, if you give them the access, if you give them your time and you build that relationship and you provide them with everything they need to thrive, they will thrive. It makes sense, right? It makes sense. Another really key part of the membership model, which again comes with training for the educator, is the relationship that the teacher has with the support staff in the room, right? I have seen scenarios where the interpreter's in the room, the teacher's in the room, but they do not communicate with each other. There is no relationship there. They are just standing parallel next to each other, but there is no interaction. That is not the team that we want to see for this membership model, right? What you want to see is the teacher working closely with the interpreter and the deaf educator in the room, the EA, whoever's in there. They have a really strong working relationship. The teacher knows how to work with an interpreter, because that is a very important skill that isn't innate for a lot of teachers. If they've never done it, you can't just have an interpreter in the room and know how to work with one. There's actually a training that needs to happen there for you to understand the interpreter's role, why they are there, and how you can utilize them to support the deaf child. So that working relationship is so, 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 so important. So if you have an interpreter or a deaf educator in your room, you need to sit down with them, and start to really collaborate with them and understand their role and how you can use it, because that is so, so, so critical to the success for this deaf and hard of hearing child. And, that sometimes takes time, but it can be such a beautiful thing. And I've seen this done so, so well by new teachers who've never had a deaf child, but they take it on and it becomes this wonderful experience. I've also seen it done very, very poorly. And so we just need to be really open to ensuring those relationships are built on a really strong foundation, and that everyone is, in the know around what is needed to best support that deaf child. And that includes the teacher having a direct relationship with the deaf child and being able to approach the deaf child, have conversations, sit down, support one-on-one. The teacher should never not be doing that just because the deaf child has assistive staff there. If the teacher is sitting down with hearing peers and doing this one-on-one work when it's quiet work or independent work and supporting in these one-on-one scenarios, the deaf child deserves the same. Interpreters are not teachers. They are interpreters, very, very good at their job, but they are not teachers. They have not done the degree. They have not had the experience. That is the teacher's role, to sit down with the deaf child and support them with their work. So that is really important, that they receive that opportunity on the same basis as their hearing peers. I could really talk about this all day. So as I mentioned, with this membership model, deaf kids know when they are being included, just as much as they know when they're being excluded or marginalized or left out. So they know when that's happening, but they also know and they feel it when they are an active member and an equal member in that class, and that they're respected by the class and the teacher. They are so aware, and their entire body language, approach to learning, everything shifts when they know that they are an active member of that classroom. So this idea of the membership model is this inclusive model that we want to be achieving and we want to be striving for. It fosters this sense of belonging, which is so important for our little deaf people, as well as when they grow into those teen years. So, so important. They recognize that people understand and accept them for who they are. And there's not just a quick fix of here's a few adjustments and off you go. They really feel like they are being supported in their learning environment. That is what we should be seeing in that membership model, because it's so, so powerful when it is done well. And so I think they're the two models that I really want to talk about today. And as I said, the visitorship model, yes, is still very prominent. We're still seeing it a lot in our early learning centres, in our school, primary and high. It's still happening. But we can, once we're aware of it, we can go out and make some change around it. And that is the very exciting thing about this, guys. We can always improve this. We can wake up and do something different. And I really hope that this solo episode has given you some insight into the two models and how they are different. Because they are very, very different, and they can make or break a deaf child's future and their academic, social, and emotional success. Because we know that deaf kids can actually thrive and succeed and meet us at those expectations that we set for them if we actually give them the opportunity. If we give them everything they need, the tools in their toolkit, provide them with those reasonable adjustments, and really believe in them that they can do this, they will do it. Perpetuating the myth that a deaf child can't is the quickest way to ensure that they don't. But if we believe in them and we give them these tools and we bring them into our learning environment as a member, a real member who feels a sense of connection and belonging to their peers, their educator, that class culture, wow, the things that can happen. I've seen it time and time again, and it is just so powerful. And our deaf kids deserve it. They really, really do. So I hope this episode was a good one for you guys, particularly for those parents who are out there advocating and trying to really understand that idea of that model of what they want for their child in the classroom. That is a really good place to start, is really talking, and you can use that language talking about visitorship versus membership. None of us want our deaf child to just be a visitor. They are worth so much more than that, and they deserve So much more than that. Okay, guys, I'll see you next week. Have a good one. Hey, everyone, and welcome to